And we came up to the 13-mile peg, and I noticed there was a road going off to the left, and it said Mullaloo Beach 4 miles. Signs like that act like magnets to both my wife and I. And we looked at each other and both nodded, and we turned left to have a look at this Mullaloo Beach. And we drove again down this black ribbon of road through the bush, undulating road going up and down, and then suddenly we breasted a rise, and in a gentle slope before us there was open space, a brilliant blue sea, beautiful sunshine, and to the right of the road there was small roads going off, and that was Mullaloo. There was about 12, 15 houses there. And I stopped the car. I was so taken by the view. And my wife said, "I'd like to live here." And I was aghast because there was no electricity. If you wanted water, it looked as though you had to dig it or bring it in. And we had 4 children. I said, "You can't live here." "Well, we've come from a grimy industrial north of England. I'd like to live by the sea for a change." And so I made inquiries. We bought a block, and that would have been in the May of 1967. And then we started to save.
Do you remember how much the block cost?
Yes, it was. There was 2 blocks side by side in Coolyanga Road, and they were advertised. There was a post on one, and I went and rang the bloke whose name was on this, the estate agent, and he said they're $2,000 each. Which,
dollars or pounds?
Dollars.
Dollars.
Yeah,
Okay.
which was an enormous, made a severe dent in any monies we had. And I said to him, would the people who own it make accept an offer? And he said, "Well, what are you willing to offer?" I offered, I think it was $17.50, and he rang these 2 old ladies who owned it, according to him, and he was speaking to both of us at the same time, and they said, "No, it's not enough, and we want at least $19.50. And I said, "Well, can we split the difference? I'll give you $18.50 and it will be cash." And he went off, and I heard him repeat what I'd said to these ladies. Then he said, "Okay," and he came back to me and he said, "Come in the office tomorrow and sign up the papers, you can have it for $18.50. So we had a block 17.5 miles from the GPO, and then the next problem was to get somebody to actually build it, because there was a building boom in Perth at the time and nobody wanted to go out to Mullaloo. In fact, half the population of Perth didn't know where Mullaloo was. Eventually we got the house built, and it was, when would it have been? December 1968 that we actually moved into the house.
So that's a year and a half later.
Yeah. And in all that time we were living on the hostel. And I went along to the only other house in Coolyanga Road at that time, and the occupant was a guy named Les, and I said, "Excuse me, but how far did you have to dig for water?" And he said, "About 20 feet. I said, "Well, how do you go about it? Because I don't know anything about this." He said, get 4 concrete liners, 4 foot across. Put one on the ground where you want to your hole, jump inside and start throwing the sand out. And that works fine as long as you're working in sand. But you're also working in cap rock. When we got down 4 feet, a little spur of rock appeared at the bottom of the liner. We rolled the second liner on. And I used to be coming up every time I had a day off. The whole family would come up. I would jump down the well and start throwing sand out, and Zena would be at the top with a bucket. I'd fill the bucket with sand and she'd haul this bucket up and then find that it was very heavy to lift, so she would lift it out sideways, and in doing so pour half the sand back on top of me. It was a laborious process. And we were digging and I managed to get down to 3 liners. And in the meantime, through my love of scuba diving, I'd met a guy who lived in Gingin, an Australian, and one of these that did everything. And he came down, looked down the well that had taken months to dig, and he said, we should shove some dynamite in that and blow it out. I said, well, you need a license, don't you? He says, just go to the police station and tell them that you're going to blast next Sunday. So I went to the Wanneroo police station, and the sergeant there said, oh, well, before you blast, I want you to knock on every house in your street and tell them to take things off the mantelpiece. And I said, Sergeant, there's only one house in the street and he's 5 blocks away from me. Doesn't matter, it says in this book here, and I want you to block both ends of Coolyanga Road. Don't allow any traffic down. And so comes the great